Call to order this regular meeting of the Minnehaha County Board of Adjustment, and we will begin with a few introductory comments. As a courtesy to everyone here tonight, please make sure that all cell phones have been silenced. Please note that tonight's Planning Commission meeting will be rebroadcast via CityLink and posted on the www.minnehahacounty.org site for viewing by the general public. The Planning Commission convenes as the Zoning Board of Adjustment to consider variance applications and administrative appeals. For these items, we will follow our normal hearing procedure by requesting planning staff to present a report on each item, and then request the petitioner to come to the podium and make a statement or answer any questions. Anyone from the audience wishing to address the item will be recognized, and they can move to the podium and state their name and address for the record. The Board of Adjustment will then discuss the matter, take appropriate actions, and any actions taken by the Board of Adjustment are considered final. Okay, first on the agenda is the approval of the minutes of the October 25th, 2021 meeting. Item number 2 is Zoning Board of Adjustment, Appeal 23-01.
Do we need to approve number 1, so this regular agenda or not?
Pardon me?
One by one, approve the minutes first.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry. Yeah, I need a motion to approve the minutes of the October 25th meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes on the minutes. Okay, item number 2, Zoning Board of Adjustment, Appeal 2301, appeal of the planning director's decision to deny the issuance of a building permit for a horse stable prior to the construction of a single-family dwelling on the property legally described as Lot 11, Block 2, Cedar Ridge Addition, North Half, Southwest Quarter, Section 3, Township 102 North, Range 49 West, Mapleton Township. Petitioner is Christopher Kranzler. He's also the property owner. It's located 3.5 miles north of Sioux Falls. Scott?
Thank you. Scott Anderson, Planning Director. And tonight is an appeal of an administrative decision by the Planning Director. The staff analysis would be that the petitioner initially contacted the Planning Department on May 22nd through the county's website, inquiring on general information and rules for obtaining a building permit for a small garden shed to store supplies and equipments while they maintain their property. The property is part of the Cedar Ridge Plan Development. And currently, as the chairperson read, this is Lot 11, Block 2. And right now, at this point, it is vacant. Staff responded the same day to explain that an accessory building such as a garden shed would not be allowed until there would be a primary use established on that lot. The primary use for this parcel is for a single-family residence. And the email correspondences are included for your review. On May 25th, the petitioner came into the planning office to revisit the question of allowing an accessory building to be permitted prior to establishing a principal use. And once again, staff indicated that this was not permitted. The next day, on May 26th, Mr. Kranzler appealed the planning director's rules for the administration of the zoning ordinance. The planning director is granted the authority to enforce the provisions of the zoning ordinance and establish rules for administration as outlined in Article 2201A. And an appeal of the planning director's decision is addressed in Article 2103 of the zoning ordinance. So, Lot 11 of this Cedar Ridge Plan Development was originally part of Sub-Area C, which was the ag area. The property owner, Brad Wagner, subsequently amended the plan development in 2021 to change the use of this area, to change it from Sub-Area C, which is the ag area, to Sub-Area A, which is the residential. Ordinance MC 16-169-21, changing the land use from an ag use to a residential use, is attached for your review. The ordinance indicates that 2 additional single-family residential lots are to be included in the Sub-Area A. Residential on the subject property upon which Lot 11, Block 2 has been platted. Therefore, as set forth above, the current principal use of the parcel is clear. It's for single-family residential pursuant to County Ordinance MC 16-16921. The zoning ordinance further goes on to define a principal use, principal buildings, and a principal buildings as, and I've included those definitions for you. 550, a principal building, which is a building in which is conducted the primary or predominant use of the lot on which it is located. And definition 555, principal use, is the primary or predominant use of any lot. As indicated in ordinance MC 16-169-21, this is defined as single-family residential. The zoning ordinance also provides a definition for an accessory building, which is definition number 5, accessory building or use, a subordinate building or portion of the main building which is incidental to and customarily in connection with the main building or the main building of the premises and which is located on the same lot with the main building or use. An accessory use is one which is incidental to the main use of the premises. So an accessory use is one that is incidental to the main use of the premises. While in this case, the principal use has been set by ordinance, no principal use has yet been established. The subject property, Lot 11, Block 12, is vacant. A garden shed is not a principal use, but would be an accessory use to a single-family residence. Similarly, a horse stable is also not a principal use of the property. The petitioner must be granted a conditional use permit as indicated in Article 10.0614A1 before constructing a horse stable. The applicant has not requested or obtained a conditional use permit for a stable. Staff feels that the zoning ordinance is correctly interpreted. Accessory uses are not allowed on a parcel until the principal use has been established. The Board of Adjustment can adopt staff's decision regarding the garden shed and deny the applicant's appeal to the Board of Adjustment, or overturn staff's decision regarding the garden shed and allow the accessory structure to be constructed. As the applicant has not yet applied for a conditional use permit for a stable, the applicant must apply for a conditional use permit before any decision on this is presented to this body. A conditional use permit for stabling a horse requires a conditional use permit for the stabling of horses requires that they are owned by the resident of the property and are not used or stabled as part of a commercial operation. I think what's important there is that there's a residence on there, that the resident is on that property. So staff's recommendation is that staff finds an accessory structure cannot be constructed prior to a principal use being established on the subject property, and that in addition, the applicant must be granted a conditional use permit before constructing a horse stable, indicating that the horse stable is also an accessory use to an established principal use of the property. I'd be glad to answer any questions. I didn't take any pictures because there's nothing out there except a vacant lot. I'd be glad to answer any questions you have.
Any questions for Scott? It's not at this time. Is the petitioner here? Will you please step forward, state your name and address?
Chris Kranzler, 4720 Southwest Park Avenue, Sioux Falls. I'm not sure if you guys were provided my letter, my appeal letter that so in it, first of all, there's two issues, and they're being combined together. One, I initially asked about a garden. So this is a vacant lot. We planted 150 trees out there. It's 3 acres. It's a nice, and we're trying to keep it nice and maintain it and plant a bunch of trees. The ordinance says under 120 square feet, you don't need a building permit. And that's why I initially inquired hey, do I actually need a building permit? And he said, well, it's an accessory structure and you don't have a house there. So no, we're not going to grant it. Perfect. That's no argument there. That is a completely separate issue than the horse stable. If you read my appeal, ordinance 10.0614 is the comprehensive ordinance governing the Cedar Ridge plan development. We purchased lot 11, which is in sub area A. Ordinance 10.06-A1 specifically lists out what the primary allowed uses are on a lot in sub area A. The ordinance basically says that any land use listed on a rural residential zone piece of land is an allowed, approved primary use on our lot. At this time, and for the foreseeable future or ever, I don't know if we're ever going to build a house on there. We're actually looking at the lot next to it to build a house, and then just keep this for the stable and a nice little pasture area. So on this piece of land, for right now, a horse stable would be the primary use, which is allowed under the ordinance regulating land use in our plan development. Scott referred to a conditional use permit. When I went into the office to talk to him and lay out my case, he said that there is no such thing as a conditional use permit on or in a plan development. The plan development already specifies what you can and cannot build. A horse stable is already permitted. In the email that Scott sent me, he specifically said that there's no such thing as a conditional use permit. So there's some conflicting information there. So I guess that's where I'm at. The ordinance governing Cedar Ridge states in black and white that a private horse stable is a pre-approved primary use. And when I was denied, just because I'm not an expert on ordinances and stuff, I went and talked to a real estate lawyer just to make sure that, I was speaking factually and understanding things, and his understanding, reading through the ordinance, was what I determined, that it's black and white. It's permitted. You guys have any questions or?
Have any questions for him?
Madam Chair, I guess I'll trying to reconcile. Obviously, we're hearing two different sides here and trying to reconcile
it's
where, if we're misunderstanding on one side or the other. What I took from in one of Scott's last statements in his staff report was that the stabling of horses requires that they are owned by the resident of the property within the, I guess we're talking rural residential. So would you agree with the interpretation then that requires you to be
No,
a
because-
resident on that? Like, are those two things tied?
No. Under that interpretation, that would completely nullify that ordinance. I mean, those two things are not compatible. It says in the ordinance that a stable is a primary use of that land, but he's saying, if you'd follow Scott, that would never be. I mean, that could never happen.
So if I'm following, Madam Chair. So I've got 10.0614 Cedar Ridge Plan Development District in front of me. You are in sub-area A.
Correct.
So in some ways, we can disregard sub-area B and C, but your argument is that within sub-area A, so A1, use is permitted, a building or premises shall be permitted to be used for the following purposes. And then you're highlighting permissive uses, permitted special uses, and conditional uses of a rural residential district. So you're incorporating all of those things in, which brings in 4.04 conditional uses A through Q, if you're following with me. J is the stabling of horses, provided they are owned by the resident of the property and not used as a commercial operation on the property. Are you following with me there?
Yep.
So then I'm coming back to Scott's point that are you engaging in the stabling of horses provided they are owned by the resident of the property? Or are you using it as a commercial operation on the property?
No, it's 100% not a commercial. It's just for, it'd just be for my wife's horse.
And I guess then I'm back to this key crux of provided they are owned by the resident of the property, because we're in a rural residential district. So does the primary use have to be residential?
I would argue no. I mean, if you go to the definition of a residential lot, it doesn't even, if you go to definition 3.55, it says a lot is a tract of land having a specific boundary. A lot used for residential purposes may only include one main building together with its accessory building. It doesn't say that a residential lot used for residential purposes, the only thing you can build on there is a house.
I think it's, just to engage in you here a little bit, I think it's assuming there's a residence, like the context of the rural residential in and of itself is already, it's kind of begging the question. It's assuming there is a house there and it's residential in some way, and then on top of that, you could do all these different things, A through Q, conceivably.
But that's not actually, I mean, that's not actually how the ordinance is written, though. The ordinance, sub-area A says that any of these uses are a permitted primary use.
Where are you getting primary?
Well, permitted, a permitted use. As in not an accessory use. I mean,
Okay, yeah,
Scott's making the argument that it's an accessory, but the rural residential clearly defines it as not an accessory. I guess that's my
Yeah.
argument.
no, I think we are splitting some hairs on some distinctions here. I guess I maybe want to go a different track of questions here, but if anybody else had anything on this line.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, make sure
Oh, yeah.
we're getting on the mics.
Can I say one more thing?
Yes, go ahead.
This land use, I mean, this whole community, it's got a huge horse pasture right in the middle. It's got a huge horse arena. There's 4 other little stables. There's 8 horse pens. There's a dozen horse trailers. It's not some oddball thing that I'm asking for. I mean, it fits in with the whole theme of this development. It's a horse community.
Okay, just on this issue before I pivot, I guess, Scott, would you walk me through these in any different way than
Well,
what we
first
just
of
did?
all, the petitioner, Mr. Kranzler, is correct. There is a horse stable there, and there's horse pens, and there's other little horse facilities, but those are all a different sub-area. Those are the agricultural sub-areas. So he's mixing sub-areas to, he's correct, there is a huge stable in the middle. That's sub-area, that's the ag sub-area. His property is in the residential sub-area, which is indicated in that ordinance MC 16-16921. So 2 years ago, the applicant amended the plan development, and most of you were here on that at that time, to change that from an ag use to a residential use. So if you are correct, Commissioner Kipley, you should have it is a residential use. It is similar when we look at it to how we would handle rural residential. So he could apply for a conditional use permit if he's residing on that property for a horse stable.
So Scott, how do you respond to that? Where are we? This kind of starts to pivot to how do we get to alternative solutions here? Can we do a conditional use permit or not? I'm kind of hearing
He
mixed.
could. And I apologize to Mr. Kranzler. I was incorrect. When I went back and looked, there are some plan developments where we don't call out conditional use permits, and there are some that we do. Yours happens to be one that we do have indicated you can apply for a conditional use permit. So that is why it is indicated in the recommendations that if he wants a horse arena, it is a conditional use within that,
Yeah, that was that
that
list
sub-area A. As you listed all the A through
A
Q.
through Q.
You'd have to, but you have to have a residence on the property to apply for those conditional use permits.
So those are uses that are permitted so long as permissive use, you just can do it. Permitted special use if you follow the rules, conditional use if you get the CUP.
Yes.
So you still have to meet the definition of the type of use. And of a rural residential district, you're saying incorporates that it assumes it's residential first and foremost.
And particularly the horse stable, because it says right there, resident, a resident of
Yeah.
that parcel, and there is no resident.
So, yeah, I guess I think I'm leaning to your side of the argument, Scott, on just kind of the textualist, like, reading of this, but I guess I don't want to lead the applicant astray if we maybe gave some information that you can't do a CUP, because maybe he's just going down the wrong avenue here rather than appealing. I think the technical decision here should probably be upholding the decision of staff, but could he just turn around and ask for a conditional use permit or some other mechanism to go down a different path?
He could ask for the conditional use permit, but in all honesty, he's going to get a recommendation of no until there's residents on the property.
Okay. Yeah,
mean, I
that's
just wanna
fair.
make
I just
sure-
want to think it through.
I don't want anyone surprised. I also, he's also correct, he could have a garden shed that's less than 120 square feet, because we don't even get a building permit. You're not required to get a building permit. So technically, you could have a shed on this parcel if it's less than 120 square feet, so 10 by 12.
Anybody else want to join in the fun?
Okay.
You're doing a good job.
Any further comments?
Can I add a couple things here?
It's your call, Madam Chair, but I would like to hear from him some more, so.
I'll give you a few more minutes. And then
I know,
we'll
I know
close it
it's getting
down.
late. I know everybody wants to get home. I apologize. I mean, this is a big deal to me. I mean, it's we've got a lot of money tied up in this, and this is, I mean, the ordinance is one of the reasons why we purchased this 3 acres. To me, clearly reading that, hey, it says any of these uses is a permitted use and it shall be permitted. I mean, it says it shall be permitted, not, well, it might be permitted. I mean, that was maybe my bad assumption, but I thought it was pretty clearly worded in the ordinance that horse stable is a permitted use and it shall be permitted. Scott brought up the point that it was taken, or these lots were taken out of sub-area C and put into sub-area A. Well, I'll point out in sub-area A, B, and C in this plan development, it was specifically listed in each of the sub areas that a horse stable was a permitted land use in sub area A, B, and C. Now I know we're getting hung up on the, well, you gotta, it's gotta have a resident on the land. But like I said, that would completely nullify the Cedar Ridge sub-area A ordinance. I mean, they're at odds. I mean, they can't be reconciled. And I'll also point out a couple of the other approved uses in sub-area A, like a substation or a government building, that are permitted uses, not needing a conditional use permit because they're already defined as a permitted use. You can't make the same argument that you need a resident. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Like I said, these ordinances are at odds. And as I said before, what I'm asking for isn't weird. It's not going to affect anybody. You're not even going to be able to hardly see it. It's behind a shelter belt. You can't even see it from the road. I guess what I'm saying is it's I guess it's a judgment call. It's not going to hurt anybody. It's not going to set any precedent because this ordinance only applies to Cedar Ridge. It's not going to hurt. It's not going to hurt anything or anybody or do anything except harm me to grant this permit.
Well, and I think when you say judgment call and kind of weighing the equities of different things, I think that's more of a proper judgment within a conditional use permit hearing where we're weighing what are the burdens and benefits to all the neighboring land. This is just we're acting as a zoning board of adjustment on the appeal of this decision that I am kind of following along, and I think it's textually correct. So if we want to take some other avenues, I'm open to those. I think sometimes it's a little bit, I think from your vantage point, a little bit literalist. We're literally reading into what uses are permitted in sub-area A, and it takes us to those things that are able to be used in a rural residential district. And then once we say rural residential district, it presumes residents. And it even asks that the stable owner be the resident. So I think we're kind of stuck in a bind there that I don't know that the text allows us to go any other way. We're basically a kind of a quasi judicial body that's reading the text in front of us. That would be my opinion. I'd be interested in anybody else's, but that's kind of where I'm at with this, but definitely open to other creative possibilities. And I get Scott's position on the CUP. My only other question then about alternatives here, there's a CUP. Obviously, we've talked tonight about minor amendments or major amendments. If we want, like I just don't have the map. Like, is this really embedded right in that residential area? There's no carving it back out, or is this just thinking it through?
The applicant, he could apply to do a major amendment and make a fourth, sub-area D or E and call it the Kranzler lot and create whatever uses he wants. But you have to go through a hearing process where we send out notices to the neighbors and everyone gets to participate. Because I worked with Brad Wagner on the rezoning of this, and it was always the intent that that be a residential development, not horse stables on every single lot. And I think if you've been out there, they're all single-family residences. His would be the only one that would have a horse stable with it. So I just think was never the intent of the plan development to allow every resident to have a horse stable.
Yep, and I think that's a subsequent conversation. I still kind of think that we're stuck in this appeal of this matter, as I'm following the logic of the ordinance, I think I come out the other way, and respect you coming out here and waiting this long for me to just come out the other way on you, but that's where my head's at. I'd be interested in if any of those other options are amenable to you to go down a different track, but I think we're hitting a dead end on this one from my perspective tonight.
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
If it says black and white that in sub-area A, a horse stable is a permitted use, how do I get that? How is that accomplished? You guys are saying it can't be accomplished
So
without completely rewriting, completely
So if
throwing
you were-
that ordinance out the window.
if you were in sub-area B or sub-area C, I follow your logic, because it just says use is permitted, horse stable. Use is permitted, stable, limited to pasture, boarding, and shelter. But you're in A, so that takes us to A sub 1, use is permitted. A building or premises shall be permitted to be used for the following purposes. And then the category bundles in permissive uses, permitted special uses, and conditional uses of the rural residential district. And then that takes us to that list of A through Q conditional uses, and a building or premises may be used for the following purposes in the rural residential district if a conditional use for such use has been obtained in conformance with the requirements of Article 19 on conditional use. And then you get to J, stabling of horses, provided they are owned by the residents of the property. So you're not the resident of the property, you're not getting it in conformance with the requirements of Article 19. So when you kind of work that backwards, I think there's at least a couple grounds that you could, but you haven't to this point. And yeah, when we're in the rural residential, it's already assuming that you're a resident. So it might seem kind of arbitrary, and I mean, again, without knowing all the context, I trust Scott when he's saying that this would, even when you got to a CUP, he would still recommend denial of that, but I'll kind of leave that aside. So it feels a little hypertextualist, but that's how I would go through it. So I don't know, Madam Chair, we've probably spent enough time unless somebody wants to break new ground.
Any other comments? Any commissioners? Okay, I think I'll close the floor, and
I'll make a motion to uphold the staff decision on this matter.
I'll second that.
okay, I have a motion and second for denial on the Zoning Board of Adjustment Appeal 23-01. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Any old business? No. New business? I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Got out before 10.
Lately.
Record. No, it's late.